I never thought a piece of paper could throw my whole life into chaos, but that's exactly what happened when I checked my mail that Tuesday morning. There it was, sitting innocently in my mailbox. A cream-colored envelope with gold calligraphy that would end up testing every relationship I held dear. The morning had started so normally. Coffee with Rachel before she headed to her job at the pediatric clinic. A quick kiss goodbye, and me settling into work from home like I did every Tuesday. Nothing suggested this would be the day everything changed. Finally, I muttered, carefully opening the envelope. My brother Tom's wedding invitation had been the talk of the family for weeks. Mom had been calling almost daily with updates about venues, flowers, and how perfect Claire was at organizing everything. The paper was thick and expensive, with delicate flowers embossed along the borders. As I read the formal text, something felt off. I read it again, so this time, my stomach tightening with each word. Mr. Michael Anderson is cordially invited to celebrate the wedding of Thomas Anderson and Claire Mitchell. I flipped the envelope over, checked inside it again. Nothing, just my name, not Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, not Michael and Rachel Anderson. Just me. My wife of 4 years wasn't mentioned anywhere. The morning sun streaming through our kitchen window suddenly felt too bright, too harsh. I sat down hard at our breakfast bar, the one Rachel and I had picked out together when we renovated the kitchen last year. She'd been so excited about that renovation, spending hours with my mom picking out tiles and cabinet colors. Now I was staring at gold-lettered proof that something was very wrong in our family dynamic. This has to be a mistake, I said to myself, pulling out my phone while heading to my home office. Rachel was at work. Thank God for small messes, giving me time to sort this out before it became a thing. I called my mother, trying to keep my voice casual as I paced between my desk and the window. Hey Mom, just got Tom's wedding invitation. Oh wonderful, isn't it beautiful? Claire picked out the design herself. The paper alone cost. Yeah, it's gorgeous, I cut in, watching a neighbor walk their dog past our house, trying to ground myself in the normalcy of the moment, but I think there might have been a mix-up. Rachel's name isn't on it. The silence that followed lasted a beat too long. In that moment, I could picture my mother's face perfectly, the slight pinch between her eyebrows she gets when she's about to say something she knows I won't like. Well, honey, she said, her voice taking on that careful tone she uses when she's trying to navigate tricky waters. They're trying to keep the guest list small. You know how expensive weddings are these days. Small. Mom, Rachel's my wife. She's been part of this family for 4 years. I stopped pacing, gripping the back of my desk chair. She helped organize Tom's surprise birthday party last year. She spent 3 days helping you prep for Christmas dinner. How can she not be invited to his wedding? Now, Michael, don't make this difficult. Sometimes we have to make compromises. Compromises? What does that even mean? I was pacing again, my free hand raking through my hair. Is this coming from Claire? Because if it is... I really can't discuss this right now, sweetie. I have a hair appointment. We'll talk soon, okay? The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there in my office, staring at my phone like it might give me answers. The house suddenly felt too quiet, the ticking of the clock on the wall marking time until I'd have to tell Rachel she'd been deliberately excluded from my brother's wedding. I spent the next few hours trying to reach Tom, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I sent texts that showed as delivered but remained unanswered. By the time I heard Rachel's car pull into the driveway, my stomach was in knots. I'd accomplished exactly nothing work-wise, instead spending the day remembering all the times Rachel had gone above and beyond for my family. She came in beaming, her dark hair slightly windblown, carrying a bag of takeout. I got Thai food. I know we said we'd cook, but I had the worst day and... She trailed off, finally really looking at me. What's wrong? I couldn't hide anything from her, never could. Rachel had this way of reading my face like a book she'd memorized. 40 years of marriage, 6 years together total, and she could spot my moods from a mile away. Usually, it was one of my favorite things about her. Today, it made everything harder. I pulled out the invitation and handed it to her. "Tom's wedding invitation came," I said quietly, watching as she opened it. Her smile faded as she read, then read again, just like I had. I saw the moment it hit her, the slight widening of her eyes, the small intake of breath. She looked up at me, her brown eyes filling with hurt. "I didn't understand," she whispered. Did they forget?" "I called Mom," I said, leading her to sit at our kitchen island. The Thai food sat forgotten on the counter, the smell of pad Thai mixing uneasily with the tension in the room. It was a mistake. Rachel set the invitation down like it might burn her. "What did she say?" "Some bull about keeping the guest list small." I took her hand, hating how cold her fingers felt. "Baby, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to fix this." She pulled her hand away, standing up abruptly. "No, don't. Don't try to fix it. If they don't want me there," her voice caught. "I need a minute." She hurried upstairs, leaving me alone with our cooling Thai food and that damned invitation. I gave her 10 minutes before following her up to our bedroom. She was sitting on our bed, staring at the framed photo on her nightstand. A picture from last Thanksgiving, all of us laughing around my parents' dining table. Rachel was next to my mom in the photo, both of them wearing matching autumn-themed aprons. "I thought we were close," she said as I sat beside her. "Your mom and I, we talk almost every week. She helped me plan my whole garden last spring. We have lunch sometimes, just us." I thought. She broke off, tears spilling down her cheeks. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her body shake with sobs. "This isn't right," I said firmly, "and I'm not letting it stand." The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Tom and Claire's place. They'd bought a house in the suburbs last year, not far from my parents'. The gardens were immaculate. Claire's pride and joy, according to Mom. I remembered Rachel offering to help Claire with her landscaping when they first moved in. Claire had politely declined. Tom's car was in the driveway, but no one answered when I knocked. I was about to leave when I heard movement inside. I knocked again, harder this time. "I know you're in there, Tom. We need to talk about this." The door opened, revealing my brother, looking uncomfortable in track pants and a faded t-shirt. "Mike, this isn't a good time." "When is a good time?" "Because you're not answering my calls or texts." I pushed past him into the house. "We need to talk about this wedding invitation situation." "There's nothing to talk about." Claire's voice came from the kitchen. She appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. She was already dressed for the day in a crisp white blouse and tailored pants, looking like she was headed to a business meeting rather than spending the morning at home. The invitations were sent out as intended. "As intended," I repeated, my voice rising. "You deliberately excluded my wife from your wedding. Why?" "I think you know why," Claire said coldly. "After what she said about Tom and me last year." "What are you talking about? Rachel has never said anything negative about your relationship." Tom stepped between us. "Mike, come on." We all heard what she said at the Christmas party. About us moving too fast, about Claire being after my money. I stared at him in disbelief. That never happened. Rachel spent that whole party in the kitchen with Mom and playing with the kids. When would she have had time to say any of that? "She told Emmy," Claire insisted. "And Emmy told me everything." "Emmy?" "Our cousin Emmy, who's been trying to set Tom up with her friend Jessica for years." "That Emmy?" I laughed without humor. "And you believed her over Rachel?" Multiple people heard it, Claire said, but something flickered in her eyes. "And anyway, it's my wedding. I get to decide who comes." "Fine," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "It is your wedding. But understand this, if Rachel isn't welcome, I'm not coming either." Tom's face fell. "Mike, don't be dramatic. You're my best man." "Not anymore." I headed for the door, then turned back. "You know what's funny? Rachel defended you two to Emmy at that party. Annie was making snide comments about how fast you got engaged, and Rachel told her that when you know, she said you two were perfect together." I shook my head. Guess no good deed goes unpunished. I left them standing there, Claire's face slightly paler than before, Tom looking uncertain for the first time. The drive home was a blur of anger and disappointment. When I walked in, Rachel was sitting at our kitchen island, still in her pajamas, staring at her phone. "Your mom just called," she said without looking up. She wanted to know if I'd talked you out of making a scene yet. Making a scene? I sat down next to her. I went to talk to Tom and Claire, to try to understand what's going on. Now she looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. And I told her everything. Claire's accusations, Emmy's supposed gossip, all of it. Rachel listened quietly, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. "I remember that conversation with Amy," she said finally. "I told her to give you guys a chance, that love doesn't always need years to be real." She laughed bitterly. Guess she heard what she wanted to hear. "I'm not going to the wedding," I said firmly. "Michael, no, you can't miss your brother's wedding because of me. I don't want to be the reason." "You're not the reason I cut her off. Their behavior is the reason. Their lies are the reason." She stood up suddenly. "Get dressed. We're going out." "What? Where?" "To meet Amy for lunch." An hour later, we were sitting at Bella Luna, the Italian place downtown where our whole extended family often gathered for celebrations. Amy worked nearby, and Rachel had texted her asking to meet. I wasn't sure what Rachel hoped to accomplish, but I knew better than to argue when she had that determined look in her eyes. Amy showed up 15 minutes late, looking flustered in her business suit. Her face fell when she saw me there too. "Oh, I thought it was just going to be you and me, Rachel." "Sit down, Amy," Rachel said quietly. "We need to talk about what you told Claire." Amy's face went red. "I don't know what we're talking about." "I think you do," I said. "About Rachel supposedly trash-talking them at Christmas." That's not." Amy fidgeted with her water glass. "Look, Claire asked me if I'd ever heard Rachel say anything about them. And I just thought, you thought you'd make something up." Rachel's voice was still quiet, but there was steel beneath the softness. "Why?" "Because it's not fair." Amy burst out, drawing looks from nearby tables. She lowered her voice. "Jessica would have been perfect for Tom. They grew up together, they have the same values, the same background. But he barely gave her a chance because Claire swooped in with her designer clothes and her perfect hair and her fancy job." "So you decided to punish me?" Rachel asked. "Because you're mad your friend didn't get picked." Amy had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't think they'd uninvite you to the wedding. I just thought, maybe Claire would realize that not everyone thinks she's as perfect as she pretends to be." "You need to tell them the truth," I said firmly. "I can't. Claire will never forgive me. We work together, we're on all the same charity committees. But it's okay for them to never forgive me." Rachel stood up. "You know what? I actually feel sorry for you, Amy. It must be exhausting, carrying around so much bitterness." She grabbed her purse. "Tell them or don't tell them. But know that this says way more about you than it ever did about me." We left Amy sitting there, staring at her untouched water glass. In the car, Rachel finally broke down. "I can't believe she would do that," she sobbed. "Over something so petty." I held her while she cried, right there in the restaurant parking lot. "We'll fix this," I promised, though I wasn't sure how. The next week was tense. Rachel tried to act like it didn't bother her, but I caught her crying in the shower one morning. That's when I decided enough was enough. The annual family barbecue was coming up at my parents' house, and I was going to get answers. The day of the barbecue was perfect, sunny but not too hot, with just enough breeze to keep the mosquitoes away. Rachel had begged off, claiming a migraine, but we both knew the real reason. I arrived late, hoping to avoid the usual extended family small talk. My timing was perfect, or terrible, depending on how you look at it. As I walked around the side of the house to the backyard, I heard Claire's voice floating through the open kitchen window. "Just don't want any drama at my wedding," and after what she said about Tom and me last year. My mother's voice followed. I understand, dear. Michael will come around. He has to understand this is your day. I stood there frozen as pieces started falling into place. Before I could process what I'd heard, my father spotted me. Michael, you made it. He called out, drawing everyone's attention. My mother and Claire appeared in the doorway, both their faces showing a flash of panic before smoothing into welcoming smiles. Where's Rachel? My mother asked, though we both knew damn well why she wasn't there. Not feeling well, I said flatly. Actually, Mom, Dad, can we talk? Privately. We ended up in my father's study, that book-lined room where he'd given me countless lectures growing up. This time, I was the one doing the talking. What exactly did Rachel supposedly say about Tom and Claire? My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Michael, this really isn't the time. When is the time, Mom? Because my wife is at home right now, crying because her family, because that's what you're supposed to be, is excluding her from an important event for no apparent reason. It's not for no reason, my father cut in. Claire says Rachel made some very inappropriate comments about their relationship at last year's Christmas party. Said they were moving too fast, that Claire was just after Tom's money. I barked out a laugh. That's ridiculous. Rachel never said anything like that. In fact, we just had a very interesting lunch with Amy, who admitted she made the whole thing up because she's bitter that Tom didn't end up with her friend Jessica. My parents exchanged looks. And you made it up? My mother asked slowly. Yes, but you know what's really telling? That you also readily believed something so completely out of character for Rachel. The Rachel who spent 3 days helping you prepare for Christmas dinner. The Rachel who drove you to all your doctor's appointments when you hurt your hip last year. The Rachel who has been nothing but loving and supportive of this family. We didn't. My mother started, then stopped. Oh God. Yeah, oh God is right. I stood up. You know what the worst part is? Even if Rachel had concerns about their relationship, which she didn't, even if she had expressed those concerns to someone privately, is that really a reason to exclude her from the wedding? Are we really that kind of family? The door opened and Tom stuck his head in. Everything okay in here? We can hear you guys outside. No, everything is not okay, I said, turning to face him. Want to tell me why he was so quick to believe the worst about Rachel? Tom came in fully, closing the door behind him. Look, Mike, I know you're upset, but Claire is really sensitive about this. After what Rachel said, she didn't say anything. Amy made it all up because she's still mad you didn't end up with Jessica. Claire appeared behind Tom, her face pale. What do you mean? Amy made it up. I told them about our lunch, about Amy's confession. With each word, Claire's face got paler and Tom's got redder. I'm going to kill her, Claire whispered, sinking into my father's leather armchair. We work together every day. She's been helping me plan the wedding. She was going to be a bridesmaid. Wait, my mother interrupted. Amy admitted she made it all up. Just like that. Well, she didn't have much choice with both Rachel and me sitting there, I said. Though she seemed more worried about losing her spot on the charity committee than about destroying relationships in our family. Tom was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists. I can't believe this. All this time. Rachel must hate us. Hate you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. No, she's hurt. Devastated, actually. She trusted you all. Loved you, and you turned on her without even giving her a chance to defend herself. Claire stood up suddenly, tears in her eyes. I need to talk to Rachel. We need to fix this. Fix this. I stepped between her and the door. You think you can just say sorry and everything goes back to normal? Do you have any idea what the last few weeks have been like for her? For us? Michael, my mother said softly, we made a terrible mistake. Please, let us try to make it right. I looked at each of them, my mother's pleading eyes, my father's ashamed face, Tom's anger, Claire's tears. You know what the worst part is? Rachel defended you too to Emmy that day at Christmas. Said you were perfect together. Said sometimes love doesn't need years to be real. I turned to Claire. She was on your side even when others weren't. And this is how you repaid her. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Son, you're right. We failed Rachel. We'd failed you both. What can we do? I ran a hand through my hair, suddenly feeling exhausted. I don't know. But I do know this, until there's a real apology, not just because you got caught believing lies, but because you understand how wrong this whole thing was. Until then, I'm done. And that includes the wedding. Michael, please, Tom stepped forward. You're my best man, my brother. And Rachel is my wife, my partner, the person I promised to love and protect above all others. I headed for the door. Maybe you'll understand that better once you're married, if you ever really learn what that means. I left them there, ignoring their calls to come back. As I walked through the backyard, relatives tried to stop me, asking what was wrong, where I was going. I brushed past them all, my mind already on getting home to Rachel. She was in our garden when I pulled up, aggressively pruning her rose bushes. She only gardened like that when she was upset. I'd seen her out there for hours after her dad's health scare last year. They know, I said simply. Rachel set down her pruning shears, pulling off her gardening gloves. How did they take it? About how you'd expect. Lots of tears and apologies now that they know Emmy made it up. I sat on the garden bench, patting the space next to me. Claire wants to talk to you. Rachel sat, leaning her head on my shoulder. What did you tell them? That we're done. At least until they understand that this isn't just about Emmy's lie. It's about how quickly they believe the worst about you, how easily they threw you aside. She was quiet for a long moment, watching a hummingbird dart between her flowers. Remember our wedding? She asked finally. Of course. Remember what your mom said in her speech, about how she always wanted a daughter, and now she'd finally had one. Rachel's voice cracked. I really believed her. I pulled her closer, feeling her tears soak into my shirt. I'm so sorry, baby. Don't be. You've been amazing through all of this. She sat up, wiping her eyes. But I need you to do something for me. Anything. Go to the wedding. I started to protest, but she pressed her fingers to my lips. Listen to me. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't want you to regret missing your only brother's wedding. I don't want that for you, and I don't want it for us. Rachel, I mean it. This whole thing, it's shown me what really matters. And what matters to me is you. Your happiness. Your relationship with your family. She took my hands in hers. We can work through the rest. But missing his wedding, that can't be undone. I stared at our joined hands, at the wedding ring I'd placed on her finger 4 years ago. How did I get so lucky to find you? She managed a small smile. Just lucky, I guess. The next few days were a blur of calls and texts from my family. My mother left tearful voicemails. Tom sent long messages about how sorry he was, how he'd been an idiot. Claire even showed up at our door one afternoon, but Rachel wasn't ready to see her yet. A week before the wedding, we had dinner at my parents' house. Rachel's idea. She said we needed to clear the air before the big day. I was against it, but she insisted. We can't move forward if we don't face this head-on, she said, as we pulled into their driveway. Besides, I'm tired of hiding. My mother opened the door before we could knock, her face anxious. You came, she whispered, then burst into tears. The dinner was awkward at first. Tom and Claire were there too, Claire barely touching her food, Tom watching Rachel like he was afraid she might disappear. My father tried to make small talk about the weather, his voice too loud in the tense silence. Finally, Rachel set down her fork. We need to talk about this. Rachel, we're so sorry, Claire burst out. I fired Emmy from the wedding party as soon as I found out. I can't believe I was so stupid. This isn't just about Emmy, Rachel said quietly. This is about trust. About family. About how quickly you all decided I was someone I'm not. My mother reached across the table, But Rachel pulled her hands back. Let me finish. For 4 years, I've tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect sister-in-law. I've helped with every holiday, every family event. I've kept your secrets, supported your decisions, loved you all like my own family. She took a shaky breath. And none of that mattered when it came down to it. It did matter. My mother protested. We were wrong, so wrong. We let our excitement about the wedding cloud our judgment. We wanted everything to be perfect for Claire, and we lost sight of what family really means. Perfect for Claire, Rachel repeated. And what about perfect for Tom? For Michael? For this family that I thought I was part of? Tom spoke up, his voice rough. Rachel, you are part of this family. We screwed up. We let gossip and drama override what we knew, what we know about who you really are. He turned to Claire. And if we're being honest, I think part of it was that you felt threatened by Rachel's relationship with my family. Claire's head snapped up. What? Come on, Claire. Every time Mom talked about cooking with Rachel or gardening with Rachel or how good Rachel was with the kids, I saw your face. You were jealous. Claire started to deny it, then stopped. Maybe I was, a little. Everyone always talked about how perfect Rachel was, how seamlessly she fit into the family. I guess when Emmy came to me with that story, part of me wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe that perfect Rachel wasn't so perfect after all. Rachel's laugh was bitter. Perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm just me, trying my best to be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, a good sister-in-law. And it wasn't enough. It was more than enough, my father said suddenly. We all turned to look at him. He'd been quiet most of the evening. We're the ones who weren't enough. Weren't good enough family to you. Weren't strong enough to stand up for what we knew was right. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. I've never been good at emotional talks. That's your mother's department. But I know when I failed my family, and we failed you, Rachel, failed you both. The silence that followed was heavy with unsaid things. Finally, Rachel spoke. I want to believe we can move past this, but it's going to take time. And work. Real work, not just apologies and tears. Anything, Claire said immediately. Whatever you need. I've already changed the invitation, printed a new one. She pulled an envelope from her purse. I know it's just a piece of paper, but Rachel took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a new invitation, this one properly addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Michael Anderson. It's a start, Rachel said softly. The wedding was 3 weeks later. Rachel went, not as just another guest, but as Claire's newest bridesmaid. Turns out they had an opening after Amy's departure. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still healing to be done. But watching my wife help my brother's bride with her veil, seeing her dance with my father during the reception, hearing her laugh at my mother's tipsy toast, I knew we'd made the right choice. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, Rachel asked me if I regretted standing up to my family the way I did. I looked at her, really looked at her, remembering her tears over the first invitation, her strength in facing down Emmy, her grace and forgiveness. Not for a second. I told her, and I meant it. She smiled, that beautiful smile that still makes my heart skip, and kissed me. I love you, she said. I love you too. And in that moment, I knew that sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones that matter most. Sometimes standing up for love means standing against family. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, doing the right thing leads you right back to where you needed to be all along. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom. Thank you both for being there today. Love you guys. Rachel read it over my shoulder and squeezed my hand. We're going to be okay, she said. And looking at her, I believed it. Because that's what real family does. They fight, they hurt, they heal, they forgive. But most importantly, they learn and grow together. Maybe the greatest test of family isn't how they treat you when things are easy, but how they face their mistakes and grow from them. We'd been through the fire, but we'd come out stronger. Different, maybe, but stronger. And in the end, isn't that what love is all about?